and during the processing of cocaine, there were these little green pod-like things. I would later find out, working on the international side, that these little pods came from the nightshade family. They were used to produce a chemical called a form of what's called scopolamine, but it's a much, much stronger potion than what is commercially made. This stuff's made from the orange blossoming trumpet from the nightshade family, and we use it. We nicknamed it. It's called burudenga, the voodoo drug. We use that to drug a target. We can put them under our complete power with a properly induced drug. They'll do whatever we ask them to do, and when the drug wears off, they won't remember anything that went on during the drugging.
Used quite extensively.
Used quite extensively, yeah. You know, every time I hear of an instance, to give you an example, where an assassination is committed and someone comes forward and on the political side, now not just in a small town, but on the political side, when there are political assassinations like Rabin. I was in prison at the time, but there's no doubt in my mind that was a burudenga assassination. This kid apparently shot Rabin, went in and admitted to shooting him, and then 3 days later said he doesn't remember shooting him. He didn't remember ever signing any statement saying that that's burudenga.
You see that quite regularly, really.
Oh yeah,
don't you?
And it's actually becoming epidemic proportions. We've used it for years in the CIA, but now it's out in the general populace. And in Colombia, a lot of the gangs have it now, have access to it, and they're using it to rob people of their bank accounts. And, I mean, a guy will get hit with burudenga, given a Coke that has burudenga in it, take a drink of it, and next thing he knows, his bank account is empty, and he'd given it to this one of these drug gangs.
And they give him instructions, tell him what to do, he does it, and then 3 days later he doesn't remember.
They'll do anything. They'll shoot a person, they'll shoot themselves. They'll do anything you tell them to do.
What about drugs that the CIA uses to induce heart attacks and death?
Those are usually two-part poisons, compounds, so that they're not connected to a poison. We can, to ensure that a person gets the first portion, we've gone in and, like in an embassy, in one part of the world, we would put it in a punch so that most of the people are dosed with the first part of the compound, and then you have about 3 weeks before the second part of the compound has to be given to the target, and then the first gets into the muscles and in the heart, and it'll show up only as a compound. Once the second comes in, it'll show up in the blood only as a compound, but it actually induces a heart attack. People actually die of a heart attack, and that's why the coroners always report these as heart attacks, because it's really a heart attack, and there's no poison that shows up. It would only be a compound in the body.
Chip, is there any other particular areas you'd like to discuss before we conclude the interview?
I don't think so, Ted. I think
we covered it pretty well.
We have said quite a bit.
There was one other area I want to ask you about in conclusion then. What about Jupiter Island and the New World Order plans?
In the 1980s and 1990s, I was tasked under the Terrorist Incident Working Group to a unit called the Operational Subgroups. Many of our meetings in 89, 90, 91 were held in southeast Florida on Jupiter Island, in a briefing in a home of an affluent woman, and we held our briefings there. Those briefings would normally follow the G7 conferences and summits, and the reason it would normally follow that is because at that time, remember I said we were working as an international group, not necessarily just U.S. Intelligence officers. Under this international plan, they were looking toward doing a master plan for the whole world. You know, even as a community, as your community has a development plan to help develop the community into a better place, these people have their plans to develop the world into a better place. And I would sit in meetings and they would come to us and say, well, you know, we have a problem in this arena. We have a very uncooperative government, say in France. We need to do something there. So it would be tasked over to the operations and plans section of the operational subgroups to come up with a plan on what to do. So we would go into our planning phase. We'd look into say France, and decide, well, the president in France just isn't cooperating here. He's kind of a loose cannon. What can we do? Well, let's do a little counterintelligence work, incite some riots or something like that. And that's what we did to help neutralize these countries and these leaders. Sometimes we go into a country and wipe out that leader's bank account and let him know,
But you had the power to do that.
Sure we had.
Well, didn't you have a situation in Central or South America where the leader of the country was not cooperating, and he thumbed his nose basically at the CIA, U.S. government, and you said, well, within 2 weeks, your brother or one of your relatives would be eliminated? Is that true?
Daniel Ortega, the president of Nicaragua. We didn't have to pose that whole war down there to get him to have elections. All we needed to do was neutralize him. And we knew that all along. We went in, we told Ortega, you're going to hold free elections and you need to announce that. He said, well, I'm not going to do it. So our emissary came back and told us he's not going to do it. We sent him back down. Once it was given to the subgroups, we sent him down and told him to tell him that Raphael's going to die in 2 weeks.
Raphael was who?
His second cousin.
Okay.
Good friend of his, one of his best friends. And so he put thousands, he put him in a compound, was protected by a large contingency of troops. But on the day that we told him he would die, he died.
You want to say how he died?
Rocket fire.
In a car?
Well, no, in the compound. It was rocket fire, but we also had people on the ground there too. So whether it was rocket fire or whether it was a bullet to the head,
Well, now Jupiter.
There wasn't enough left to tell.
Unfortunately. Now Jupiter Island. Who were?
Let me qualify.
Okay.
Within 2 weeks, Ortega announced that there would be free elections in that country because he was next.
Right, and you told him that.
We told him.
How about going back to Jupiter Island? Who attended these meetings at Jupiter Island?
Had quite a few big names in those, and I'll talk about a couple of those, but I won't go beyond that because I like talking. I like breathing. I like eating. No matter how good my insurance is, I know that there's some people you never talk about.
Right.
So I won't. George Bush was one who would normally attend those meetings, if not personally, at least through teleconferencing. An additional member that was always there was the man who still commanded me in these operations and who actually recruited me into black operations. His name was Bill Colby.
Who's now dead?
Who's now dead.
Mysterious death.
When I walked away, I was told you don't just walk away, and I believe he walked away too, and that's why.
Right, mysterious death.
Another person who was there who oversaw all of our finances now runs the Judicial Oversight Committee in the
William
United
Hyde?
States Congress. Henry Hyde.
Henry Hyde.
Uncle Henry.
Henry Hyde, U.S. Congressman from Illinois.
That's the man. So you think you're going to get judicial parity? I don't think so.
That reminds me, Chip. But I have some other names I could run by you, but I won't put you on the spot, okay?
I appreciate that, Ted.
Let's see. He's a man. I'm not going to call him. I met him in the White House myself on one occasion. Not General Haig, but somebody else. Let's see. That was 1973 for me. I had another thought that I wanted to bring up, and I'll remember it down the road.
Well, you
here.
had asked me earlier what I'm doing these days, and let me tell you what I'm doing. Being a spook by trade, you can't just walk away. You can't just give it up. And you asked me what I'm doing on your radio show. What are your plans? And right now, I'm working as the two-county coordinator for the American Red Cross. And the reason I'm working as a two-county coordinator in Florida for the American Red Cross is it gives me the opportunity to interface directly with probably one of the darkest organizations the United States has ever seen, and that's FEMA.
Oh, we know about FEMA.
So I've been able to effectively infiltrate FEMA. I'm the person who deals directly with them in all issues and sit in meetings with them, and little did they know that they had a spook in their midst.
They know it now.
Yeah, they know it now. I told them last week in my last meeting with them.
Well, then you have some pretty good information, I think, don't you?
I waited till I got what I needed, and then I put it on the website. I did a big article on the website, exposed what they have going, how they effectively hope to take over. The big thing with FEMA is if the United States ever goes in to martial law, which can be put put in place any time now because of Clinton's recent filings under the National Security
executive
Act.
orders.
Right. Since he's declared a national state of emergency already, all he has to do is have a nuclear, biological, or chemical threat active, and he can declare martial law. That's going to be pretty easy if he pushes Saddam into blowing up a biological, or if he shows the United States that there are people here, factions here, trying to do that, like they just tried to do with Harris. He can then effectively declare martial law. If he does that, though, the people who really take over the country and run things is FEMA. So you have to make sure, and I don't know that James E. Witt, the current head of FEMA, is one who goes along with this plan. He just, in sitting in our briefings and everything, he's just not one that's going to do it. So.
Well, didn't they replace him? Aren't they replacing him?
So quietly, last fall, they opened some offices in Washington at FEMA headquarters and brought their Region 6 administrator, a man named Raymond Buddy Young.
Oh, we mentioned him earlier, right?
Bill
Security
Clinton's
officer.
Security chief.
That's right.
Is taking over FEMA.
Well, we'll see what happens in the future. Of course, we know FEMA is Federal Emergency Management Agency, and they have they take precedent over all law enforcement, federal and local,
And
in the event of
military.
and military in the event of a national emergency.
That's correct.
What a very clever plan devised by. That was originally set up by Bush, wasn't it?
Yeah, it actually came from years ago. And if folks would ever want to go to the website and read that article, it's available there. It's called FEMA, the Dark Underbelly.
What's your website?
It's if they'll go to www.2.net and then just click on the Black Ops at the bottom of the page, they'll go right to the website.
What about prison camps? You had information about prison camps.
When we would fly cross country in Black Ops, in Special Ops, we would normally RO in at different areas. Nellis Air Force Base was one. A lot of military bases where they have large encampment areas that are built. We would RO in. We'd stay in those encampment areas. High security encampment areas. No cargo inside. They aren't built for cargo. They aren't built to store things. They're built for people. What they intend on doing with that, I don't know, but they're in place.
How many prison camps would you say?
I know of 5 or 6 that I saw. I also know that the United States Bureau of Prisons is in the process of acquiring land across the U.S. In Coleman, Florida. They just acquired 1,200 acres for a prison, and they don't need near that for a prison. That's a big area.
Well, they already have a prison, federal prison in Coleman, Florida.
Yeah, that's correct.
There's a political prisoner there named Michael Reconnaissance, who I'm in contact with regularly.
Right.
Ex-agency also, by the way.